It's nice when you get a calendar reminder in the middle of the meeting, isn't it?
Hello to Commissioner Krugliak.
Okay. Well, let's get started, and I'm sure colleagues will join. So noting the time is 5:31 on my computer, I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to the fellow commissioners and once again, members of the public who are joining us today for the regular meeting of the County of San Diego's Independent Redistricting Commission. Let's begin with our clerk, Andrew Potter, for information about today's meeting. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Any members of the public who wish to provide oral testimony during this evening's meeting, please review the instructions posted on the redistricting website at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. We ask that individuals who wish to speak submit an online request to speak form in advance for planning purposes. However, all requests to speak from the public made at today's meeting will be honored. In addition, agendas, minutes, and supporting materials for the Commission's meetings are posted on the redistricting website, including instructions to request translation. Meeting agendas are translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, and Laotian as required by law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the roll call. Andrew, can you call the roll?
Thank you. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all commissioners are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be handled by a roll call vote. I'll ask the commissioners to please unmute your microphone and say here or present, and I'll go alphabetically. Chair Boehm.
Here, present.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Katarina. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Vice Chair Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Dostal.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Pons.
Here.
Commissioner Russ.
Here.
Commissioner Serban. Thank you.
Very good.
We'll note for the record that Commissioner Katarina has also joined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
So the next item is non-agenda public communication speakers. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on subject matters within the commission's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action the commission may take is a referral to staff. Andrew, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda items?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We have no requests under non-agenda public communication this afternoon.
Very good. The next item then is the approval of the minutes from the February 11th, 2021 meeting. Andrew, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
There are no requests to speak on this item. Thank you.
Very good. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes in a second. Do you have a motion?
I approve.
Who did I hear first? All right, we'll take Commissioner Bonds and second.
Second.
Commissioner Brown, very good. Andrew, could you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. There we go. Commissioner Chen. Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Serban. Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Chair Boehm.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
That motion passes with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Okay, and before we move on, Commissioner Serban is now here. Commissioner, did you want to participate in that vote? I just want to make sure
I'm assuming that vote was
for the minutes.
to approve the minutes, and yes, I approve the minutes as presented.
Want to be attentive and have him included. Very good. Thank you, Andrew, for that. We'll turn to the next item on the agenda. Our next in a series of commissioner trainings. Today, we're going to hear about outreach to communities of interest. In addition to the IRC's counsel, Ms. Marguerite Leone, I'm sure the commission is grateful today for our two guest speakers. Ms. Jackie Guzman is the Deputy City Manager for the City of Sunnyvale, where she oversees the establishment of electoral districts in the city and redistricting, and also has proven a great workshop speaker for those of us who saw the Common Cause workshop not too long ago. Her special assignments include the city's diversity and inclusion liaison. She has more than a decade of public sector experience, including as Deputy City Manager for the City of Cupertino and with the City of San Jose and the California Legislative Analyst's Office. She holds a master's degree in public policy from UCLA and a BA in diplomacy and world affairs. In the community, Ms. Guzman serves on the Community Advisory Panel of local public television station KQED and the Board of Asian Americans for Community Involvement, AACI. She is also a past president and current advisory board member of the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. On behalf of the whole commission, thank you, Ms. Guzman, for joining us today. Also joining us is Ms. Ginger Grimes, an attorney with Goldstein, Borgen, Dardarian, and Ho. Ms. Grimes worked with the firm first as a social justice fellow. Her practice focuses now on class and collective actions, involving wage and hour, consumer, and voting rights. Prior to joining the firm, Ms. Grimes clerked for the Honorable Daniel R. Foley of the Intermediate Court of Appeals for the state of Hawaii. Ms. Grimes volunteers as a supervising attorney for legal aid at a workers' rights clinic and is a member of the annual dinner committee for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus. Thanks as well to you, Ms. Grimes, on behalf of all of us for joining us today. As usual, after the presentation, we'll hear public comments, then commissioners will have a chance to ask questions. Because this is an informational item, there's no action for the commission, and we'll just move to commission questions after public comment. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Marguerite, please.
And thank you very much, Chair Boehm. If we could pull up the PowerPoint. And Chair Boehm so graciously introduced our guest speakers. We'll be able to get right into the meat of the presentation this evening. Our topic for training tonight is outreach to communities of interest, legal requirements, best practices, and a case study. So moving forward now, 5 slides. We have our presenters and we can move on because of Chair Boehm's thorough introduction to the 5th slide. There we go. Public outreach is not just a good idea and at the heart of what the commission's role in the redistricting process is. It's actually a legal mandate. And what we would like to do today is build from the bare bones of a mandate to the best practices of meeting that mandate, and then to a case study of what that looked like in real life, and then open the floor to questions and ideas from the commissioners. Your public outreach mandate is in state law, and it can all fit, as you see here on one slide. 7 public hearings before maps are drawn, 2 after. There's an expanded posting requirement for agendas, and with certain of those agendas, you need to include maps. Live translation as an outreach method is required if there's 24 hours advance notice, and there's a formula for deciding upon the languages for outreach, for language translation. And then you're also required to undertake affirmative steps by engaging the media, social media, community organizations, and you are required to have an internet website with an agenda and list of all of the hearings that are going to take place and instructions for how the public can participate. So this is the bare bones. It's all on one slide. And if we go to the next slide, our presenter, Ginger Grimes, is going to review for us the best practices for accomplishing the mandate. Ginger?
Thanks, Marguerite, and good evening, everyone. I've been asked to join this meeting to share my perspective as an advocate for community members because it's important in the districting and redistricting process that folks in the community learn about what redistricting is, get a say in how lines are drawn, and feel like their voices were heard and taken seriously. So I provided Marguerite a best practices checklist, and hopefully you all have received that or will receive that soon. I wrote it with my colleague, Jonathan Methestein, the Executive Director of Common Cause California. You may want to refer to that checklist when thinking about what kind of redistricting process you want to have, looking over proposals for consulting companies, and thinking about what values you want reflected in the design of your process. And with my time, I'll highlight some of those tips in my checklist. So the first and probably most important idea that I'll say about outreach to the community is to diversify the process as much as possible to reach a diverse group of residents. And it's important in designing an effective outreach process that you use creativity and your knowledge of the county to think about how to reach parts of the community that don't typically participate in local politics or may not want to participate because of some barrier. So for example, in thinking about public hearings, consider increasing the number of hearings from the statutory minimum, varying the dates and the times of the hearings to accommodate work schedules and school schedules. The hearings should be in geographically diverse parts of the jurisdiction, with an emphasis on hearings in neighborhoods that tend to participate less in local politics. The locations should be physically accessible to people with disabilities or people who are caring for the young or the elderly or people who use mobility devices. The locations should be accessible by public transit. The locations should also be sensitive to the fact that some members of the community are deterred by locations near law enforcement, so courthouses, police stations, parole departments. The hearings should have translation services for limited English-speaking residents. And the information that you distribute about the map drawing process should be translated into non-English languages. And of course, we're in a pandemic and we don't really know what the vaccination schedule is going to be like. So you want to make hearings available online, but also recognize that there are portions of your community that don't have easy access to the internet and may prefer in-person hearings. And so is there a safe way that you can make both of those things available? The second tip, given the delay and uncertainty around the release of census data, you may not want to wait until that data is released to start doing community education around the redistricting process. It's going to be really hard to convince people to participate in giving testimony or drawing county district lines if they don't even know what the difference is between what the county is responsible for and what the city is responsible for and what the state is responsible for. And especially if you're going to be crunched, for time because the data is being released so late, you probably want to start community outreach and education way ahead of time, so there's time for word of mouth to happen and people can start talking about this process. You might want to start sending out mailers in advance in multiple languages, introducing people to the idea of redistricting, holding informal events to explain to residents why their input on county district lines matters. The third tip I'm not really following my bullet points. In the actual line drawing process, if you're using a map drawing software like Maptitude, and you may not be familiar with that software yet, but if you use something like that, you should make that software available to residents to use so they can draw and submit maps or portions of maps, like a single community of interest or a region or neighborhood or even a single proposed district. You'll need to provide training sessions on how to use that software, and those should be available in multiple languages and accessible to people with disabilities. But also, you should make low-tech maps available, maps that are printable or printed so that people can just take a marker and draw their little neighborhood that they think is important and want the commission to consider. Another tip I think is really important is to use the existing community outreach infrastructure of community organizations. Use that to your advantage. Consider collaborating with community groups and organizations. Have them revise your plan or your consultant's plan to do outreach, and to have them help outreach to their networks. Who may be in lower participating parts of the community. Consider setting aside grants to organizations to do that work. San Diego County has a lot of organizations who have been doing community organizing and civic engagement work for a long time. And some of those groups may already be receiving grants from foundations to do post-census redistricting work. So consider collaborating with those groups. And while you all come from a wide variety of experiences and knowledge about the county, these groups will have other creative ideas about where to distribute information, about location of hearings, timing of hearings. And if you have a plan that a consultant develops, they may also have really valuable feedback about that plan. And so you might want to involve outside groups with the development of that plan. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, yes. I think it's also important to give residents a variety of ways to give feedback about maps that are drawn once they're drawn. So in addition to posting maps online and allowing residents to submit feedback on maps online, which is important in our pandemic era, consider doing what the city of Sunnyvale did, and maybe Jackie will talk a little bit more about that. The city of Sunnyvale printed out big poster-sized maps and brought them to farmers markets, libraries, soccer fields, and in Sunnyvale, cricket fields, for people who are walking by to come up to the maps and engage with them. And so again, be creative, use your knowledge of the community to guide you, but also talk to community organizations who may also have creative ideas about how to reach new audiences. You might also track the demographics of people who are interacting with the county's efforts on education and outreach, who's giving testimony, who's providing feedback on the maps. And then you can make adjustments as you go if you see gaps in participation. And then the last tip that I want to emphasize about community engagement in the mapping process is how important it is for residents who participate to feel like their voices are heard and taken seriously, especially if you're engaging new residents into local politics for the first time and their entry point is map drawing. You're creating the foundation of their participation on other local issues. So if people come to a hearing and they feel like they're sort of shouting into a void and members of the Redistricting Commission dismiss their testimony, they're going to think participation in local politics is a waste of time, which I'm sure none of you would do. But I think it's important to thank members of the public, make sure that they feel like they're being heard, engage substantively with the testimony they're hearing. And those are my tips.
And Ginger, I thank you so very much. I do want to assure the commissioners that your checklist is posted online and available to everyone. And it's an excellent check. That's what it's called, a checklist, to see that bases are covered. One of the tips that I really like, and I don't know if we're gonna ever be able to do this live, but for some community members, you want to bring them out, have food. Cookies bring people to meetings. And at this point, Jackie, could I ask you to tell the commission about how some of these best practices were put to work in Sunnyvale?
Sure. And let's just go to the next slide. Thank you for inviting me. So Sunnyvale, I think, was really successful because we did a lot of groundwork. So I'll talk a little bit first about the pre-work we did. We implemented, I think, almost all of the recommendations that Ginger talked to you about. The first thing that we did was we created a comprehensive database of community stakeholders. And that was nonprofits, churches, neighborhood groups, parent groups, informal leaders in our community. And we had specific contact information and started building those relationships, letting people know, hey, this is coming up and we're going to be reaching out to you to help support us in getting the word out and connecting with your constituents. We also we identified community ambassadors and actually appointed a citizens advisory committee to serve as those community ambassadors, even though in this process, you all might be those community ambassadors for San Diego County. And our ambassadors had really good relationships with lots of folks in the community and helped us open some doors that were hard to open, especially with some of our churches that were initially reluctant to let us engage with their congregation. And that proved to be really successful. We also hired a consultant to help us develop a comprehensive outreach plan that, of course, involved social media, but also this idea, and I'll talk about this more, about pop-ups and different ways of engaging with hard to reach populations. And before we started the mapping process, for us, it was the first time we were going into districting. So we had spent about 6 months educating our community about moving into district-based elections. And in that outreach process, had been talking to the community through our newsletters and through different outreach events that this mapping process was going to happen. And they were well prepped for it when we got there. And that included actually input on communities of interest. Next slide, please. So in terms of our engagement effort, our mapping effort was a 6-month community-driven process. And as you can see, we used a variety of formats to engage the public, from formal meetings and workshops to online surveys and pop-up events. And I'll talk a little bit more about our pop-up events if we can go to the next slide. So just like Ginger said, we did set up booths, printed up big maps, and did dot voting with people that were walking by our farmers market. We went in front of our library. We went outside of churches, which was particularly fruitful when it came to reaching our language minority groups. So we specifically targeted Catholic churches with Spanish language congregations, Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, and we were really successful at getting engagement from some of those hard to reach populations that don't generally engage with us. We did go to some festivals. One of the funnest ones was we actually went to the Holy Festival. And so we have some pictures of our team actually with paint on them from the Holy Festival, engaging with other people at that event. So it could be really fun as well. And in addition to that, I went out and I asked a lot of these community groups, especially parent groups that already have regularly scheduled meetings, if I could be part of their agenda and just have 5 or 10 minutes to talk to the parent groups about this process and encourage them to engage. So that was really helpful as well. If you can have the next slide. We benefited tremendously from community organizing, which I can't take credit for. We had several groups that formed to design maps. We had our mobile home park community that formed a group. Our potential plaintiffs, the Asian Law Caucus, formed a diverse coalition of community members that called themselves the Unity Group. And what we did do was we were very supportive of the efforts. We had great communication with the groups throughout the process, made sure that they had the technical tools available to draw maps and even access to our demographers if they had any technical issues. So we did hold some office hours for our demographers to just be available to people, to map makers that had questions about their maps, wanted to make sure that their maps were going to be technically feasible. And in the end, we received 26 map submissions from the community. Our demographer did develop some maps. None of the demographers' maps were chosen to move forward. And in the end, council chose the Unity Group map. And one thing that I think was really successful in that is we let the map makers not only do a submission, but also refine and resubmit their maps based on council and community input. So it was a bit of an iterative process, and it helped us get to a final product. Next map. One of the things that I think helped bring legitimacy to our process was ensuring that our outreach was reflective of Sunnyvale's diversity. And we did this by using a one-page survey with everybody that we engaged with. We asked them to quickly, it was like a 1-minute demographic survey. And then we used that data to make sure that we were connecting with the people that we needed to connect with, that we were reflective, our outreach was reflective of our diversity. And as you can see, we were quite successful in reaching our diverse ethnic and racial community groups in our city. And if we could get the next slide also, we were successful in reaching all of our socioeconomic groups as well. We tracked several factors. I'm just going to show you these 2 slides. One thing I will note is we didn't do as well with engaging younger residents. Big surprise, they don't generally engage in these dry government topics, but it's something that we are looking at for this next redistricting process. And because we collected the data, we can learn from that and have different strategies to connect to that group. So I'll just end by giving you some lessons learned from Sunnyvale, if I can get the next slide. First, and it's going to be a bit of a repeat from what Ginger said, invest in that stakeholder mapping. Make sure that you know what community groups you want to target and should be targeting. Provide many ways to engage. We did things, again, from online surveys to those pop-up events to going to different community meetings, to inviting people to hearings and workshops. Go to where people are at. We can't expect that everyone is going to be able to come to a hearing, even if it is online. So we have to go to where people are at. We also can't expect them to sit through a 3-hour hearing. Some people are only willing to give you 10 to 15 minutes of their time, but that time can be very valuable if you're strategic about it. Track your outreach demographics so that you know that you are targeting the right populations that you need to target. And then let the public draw and refine their maps. I know you all are map makers yourselves, but you should give the opportunity for members of the community to contribute and propose their own maps. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for having me.
Jackie, thank you so very much. I want to mention that the great success of the Sunnyvale process is the city council. It was the interested folks actually adopted the unity plan. I think that is a great credit to that process. Now, Chair Boehm, I do have a update on timeline that's on our next slide, but perhaps we take some questions now, according to your pleasure.
Yeah, I like, because I already see a lot of questions developing, and I'm sure there are a lot of good ones after such great presentations. Thank you to you both. Let me just ask Andrew first if we have any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. There are no requests to speak on this item.
Very good. So I think we'll just turn straight to questions. Marguerite, I don't know if you can see the hands on your screen. I'm happy to defer to you, or I can take.
Chair, I would love for you to do it. Go right ahead.
Okay, very good. So right now I have Commissioner Chen, then Commissioner Krugliak, then Commissioner Katerina. Commissioner Chen, please go ahead.
Thank you. By the way, it was a very impressive accomplishment that you used a map from the public. Questions regarding the rest of your success metrics. So the one slide you showed on how many people you engaged, if I just added the numbers up, it looked like about 1,200 people. I want to know if I'm reading that correctly, and that's the number of people that actually you engaged out of the Sunnyvale population. And if so, what percentage of that is that of the Sunnyvale population? And then also, since these are best practices, what other success metrics did you use in defining these as best practices?
So I would say 1,200 is probably correct for the map making phase. But again, we had been engaging even on the districting process. And so it was much, much higher than that, even when we were going through deciding how many districts we were going to have, deciding how we were going to elect the mayor. I would say it was certainly over 3,000 different engagements. Now, I will caveat that of course we had people that engaged multiple times with them, so it's not an unduplicated count. Sunnyvale's population is, of course, much bigger than that. We're a population of about 150,000. That being said, when you think about engagements on normal government processes, this was quite successful. I mean, we have large planning processes that get 10 or 15 people to show up to a meeting. So this was still quite successful and I think pretty representative of our population. As far as other metrics for success, I think the biggest indicator of success for us is we had a lot of opposition in the beginning to even moving to district-based elections. And so it was a question of whether folks would accept the final product. And we actually had to go to the voters to get a ballot measure passed to move into district-based elections. So one success metrics is we got over 60% of the vote to move towards district-based elections, which was, great. Even the folks that were initially very hesitant about the move, in the end, because it was a community-driven process, because the map that we adopted was from the community, we got a lot of kudos around our process. And, we were worried, are we going to get sued? Or is there going to be pushback? And we haven't had that. We've gotten nothing but kudos. And to me, that's the biggest success, is that our community accepted the outcome, approved it on the ballot.
And if I can just jump in, I also want to mention that one of the metrics of success of the outreach, which is the topic that we're working on here, are on Jackie's slides showing the success in the participants when compared to the demographics and socioeconomic characteristics of the city. So that is a metric of success as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so just to preview, Commissioner Kugliak, then Commissioner Katerina, then Commissioner Inman. Commissioner Kugliak, please.
Thank you very much for such wonderful presentation. So I had two related questions. The first is that you talk a lot about where you went that was very effective. So churches, parent groups, things like that. Are there ethical or legal considerations with going to schools and trying to get parents through their kids in the school system, which of course would be a very large number of people? I didn't see that mentioned, but I wasn't sure if there were any constraints. And then a second related question is whether you all had considered actually creating an app, and whether that's just very expensive or potentially technically a burden to just give people, post QR codes and give people immediate access to maps through a phone app.
Okay. We did not consider an app process. I think that would have taken quite a bit of time to develop. Not a bad idea. What we did make sure is that our online surveys were accessible through maps. Accessible through phones. One thing that we did consider, we didn't do, was to have our online survey be a text survey where people could just get it through their phone and very easily just do the online survey through their phone. We didn't end up doing that, but we were still quite successful with our online survey because we used an existing platform. We subscribed to Open Town Hall, and we already had about 600 subscribers for that survey tool. So we just used our existing infrastructure to reach our community, which was pretty successful. In terms of ethical considerations, I don't think that asking to get time on a community group's agenda is a problem. Of course, they can always say no. And where we actually ran into some hiccups was really connecting with churches, because some of our churches were really concerned about getting politics mixed in with their church. And what we did have to explain is this is for us, it was a nonpartisan issue. It might be a little different in the county, but in the city, our districts are really, our council members are not partisan council members. So we had to explain this is a nonpartisan issue. It's trying to bring more representation and ensure equal representation for our community. And specifically, we had to sell to those congregations. We need to reach your specific language minority congregation in order for them to have a voice in political representation. So, and we honestly, for some of them, we had to use our ambassadors in the community to help us open those doors and to bring comfort. And it actually was really successful. We had booths outside. People chose if they wanted to engage with us or not. We weren't actually inside of the church, talking about this. We were outside. And so I think that helped with those issues.
But what about schools in particular, just like sending a flyer home with kids to reach out to
we did not.
Parents? Is there a problem with that?
I'm not sure. We did not do that because generally we do have good relationships with our schools, but we we don't want to abuse that relationship. And so we didn't feel like we wanted to ask them to put something in their newsletter, which is very school focused. So instead, what we did is we reached out to the parent groups and we said, can we have time on your agenda to talk about this issue we think is relevant and important to your parents? And if they chose, all of them actually chose to let us do that. And so that's how we were able to engage.
Got it. Thank you.
Before we move on, Ms. Grimes, did you want to add anything on school groups, church groups, other groups that maybe you've seen in your work?
Well, the question about the legal advice, working with school groups, I might leave that to Marguerite to explain. But I think Jackie covered it. She was working in her community. I've never lived in San Diego County. I don't know what your community is like. I don't know what the groups are like. You all know that. And you have vast life experiences that will help inform what groups to reach out to and where people who might not participate as frequently, where they might be. And your networks will have their networks. And it's good that you're starting this process early to let that all happen. Because word of mouth travels slowly, sometimes quickly, other times.
Fair point. Thank you. Commissioner Kugliak, that addressed it? Okay, so now I have Commissioner Katarina, Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Larson, Commissioner Serban. Commissioner Katarina, please.
Thank you. Wonderful presentations all around. It's a fascinating topic. So, in our pandemic COVID times, we have some challenges in San Diego County. And one of the challenges we have, aside from having a very large city in the middle, is that we have a lot of unincorporated areas that are very rural and remote. One of the things we found out when we jumped into the pandemic was that we did have quite a few families without access to the internet. And so some of the school districts did step up. And so, I'm kind of dovetailing on Commissioner Kugliak's comments. Perhaps there's some associations that we can make with that process to improve our outreach to our citizens. But my question to you is, we really are going to be struggling with the fact that we cannot meet in person right now, and we don't know when we can. So do you have any specific advice on how to reach out to our community, engage them without being able to have in-person meetings?
We're struggling with that as we plan for our redistricting as well. One thing that gives me hope is that a lot of our immigrant population has gotten used to being online because their kids are doing online work and the way that they engage with their schools is online. So I benefit from having siblings that are teachers. And so was asking them, are parents really engaging? Are they learning? And so they are. And they're forced to because their kids have to be online. So that gives me a little bit of hope. It's just a matter of how do we even reach them so that they know that there's this meeting happening. And so I'm still trying to figure out what groups are they working with. One of the things that I did also is connect with our social service agency. We have a really strong social service agency here, Sunnyvale Community Services. It's a nonprofit. Well, a lot of our families, especially the hardest to reach, every week go pick up groceries at Sunnyvale Community Services. And, the city helps fund Sunnyvale Community Services. We've been providing volunteers to pack groceries for Sunnyvale Community Services. And so it's not a big stretch for us to ask, hey, can we put in a flyer in the grocery bag that goes home with families? And we've done that not just for this process, but we've done that to get information out about COVID testing and several other things that are happening in the city. And that's been pretty successful at getting the word out.
Thank you.
I'll add on to that. Don't underestimate the usefulness of mailers, though they are way more expensive than electronic communication these days. In my practice, aside from the voting rights work I do, we have to communicate frequently with clients who, don't stay in the same physical residence or don't have access to the internet. But people now have phones and they keep their phones. So I think the ideas Jackie raised about how to make phone engagement or engagement through your phone are going to be really helpful. And that's the way that people have internet access these days too, if they don't have Wi-Fi, for example. But Jackie's ideas were great. She's very creative.
Thank you.
Commissioner Inman.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentations. In the first presentation, Ms. Grimes, one of your first bullets piqued my interest. It said 7 public hearings before maps are drawn. Now, does that mean when you go to these public hearings, the only map you can show is the current map? Does that prohibit you in certain ways of showing, well, here's what we're up to, potentially what things could look like? I mean, does that constrain us in any way to showing scenarios or what ifs or something? And then my other question was about mapping software, which I think kind of both of you covered. Is it best to put a full-fledged GIS platform out there? Something like Maptitude has a lot of functionality and you can do a lot of things with it. Or is something as simple as Draw My California Community, I think, is a website that's out there where it's very simple and you just draw circles on a map and write a description. I mean, what is it that you really need or that you found the most useful for identifying communities of interest and getting community feedback? So those are my questions.
Marguerite, I think the first question was actually your slide. Do you want to tackle that one?
I'm happy to jump into that, Commissioner Inman. It's interesting the way the law is structured. The first 7 public hearings are supposed to be a listening tour, and it doesn't mean there's not going to be maps around. It means your maps can't be out there. Before you draw a map, you're supposed to listen to what other people have to say. You will get maps during that period of time, and those maps can certainly be displayed and discussed. But it's the period of time where you gather maps, gather information, listen to the public, and then bring it back and adjust this, and then either work from maps that have already been produced or produce your own. So the limitation isn't on maps from the public. There will be plenty of them.
And then I think the second question was about mapping software. And I think, I'm not familiar with that website, but it sounds helpful. But I think the question is, what would you all as commissioners find helpful, right? Would you find helpful having sort of a granular analysis of how many people are in this specific district? Does it meet all of the legal criteria? Or are you interested in just having people outline their specific communities of interest or their neighborhoods? And then you all will do the work, or the demographer you hire to actually come up with district lines. It's I think sort of a question of how you can take information in and digest it in a way that would be useful for the commission.
And if I could help with that, Commissioner Inman, I've been in map drawing processes, and something too elementary is we're going to have a sophisticated involved group, especially after working at home for a year. Parents have become more computer literate, and if they're not, they're certainly going to ask their teenagers to help them. There are intermediate choices between Maptitude, which can be technical and difficult. not the most user-friendly, but maybe not completely. But there are intermediary tools that are produced by major companies that have been very satisfactory for the public to draw maps. It's not unusual to get 10s and 20s and even 30s of maps submitted in this process. So I think Jackie's got a good point too. Some people will sit down at a table and draw the map on the kitchen table on a piece of paper, and with an appropriate Excel spreadsheet, they can construct a district, and then the demographic consultant would be available to help refine that. So I would keep, doesn't need to be Maptitude, but I think a good public mapping software will be desirable to the public.
Good. Okay. All right. I'm conscious of our time as well as our guest time. I still have Commissioner Larson and Commissioner Servin. I'll come back to commissioners after Commissioner Larson to see if anyone else has questions. For now, though, please, Commissioner Larson.
Okay, I'll make this quick. They were both very good presentations. I think all of us can benefit from what you two have said. Jackie, I'm really happy to hear about Sunnyvale. I lived up in the Bay Area for a number of years. I was the principal in the startup of 2 high-tech companies that were located in Sunnyvale. And Ginger, I'd like to make one correction to what you said. We don't want to give our community software. What we want to do is give them the capability to map automatically. And you've got to be careful here. The software will be up in the cloud. They don't actually get software literally. I think that would scare them off. What we want to do is give them a people-friendly, interactive capability to deal with software. It doesn't matter where the computer is and where the software actually is. What they have is a capability. It's like using data processing right now. Most software does not exist in your computer. What you do is have interfaces to someone else's computer.
I think that's a good point, Commissioner Larson, and I think that's what the vision is.
Okay. Any other questions before I turn to Commissioner Servin and then we close up on this agenda item? Very good. Commissioner Servin.
Oh, hello. Hello, and thank you to our presenters, Ginger and Jackie. Very useful and wonderful information. Just circling back to Commissioner Chen's question as to the population and the effectiveness of the outreach. You had said something like maybe 15 to 3,000 contacts. I think maybe the more relevant question to measure that against is your RVAP population. Do you know what that is? Your registered voting age population in Sunnyvale?
Oh gosh, I am probably not going to know that off the top of my head.
I don't need like an exact
But
number, but I mean, if you can
I'm guessing it's, I want to say, I don't know, maybe 35,000 or so.
Yeah, now that becomes a lot more impressive. Now you got a 10% take rate.
And that is because we have a really large immigrant population in Sunnyvale. And so many of our residents are not eligible to vote.
And to add on to that, the people you want to participate in this process don't have to be eligible to vote or registered to vote, right? If you're getting minors, for example, involved in this process, you're setting a foundation for years to come about civic engagement. And 16-year-olds can't vote, right? So
I'm sorry, Ginger. So you're kind of cutting in and out there. Did you say that what we aim to do is receive input only from those who are registered to vote, or did you say that we want to get as much input as possible?
As much input as possible, definitely. So I don't know that the right comparison is only registered voters, because you want more than those registered and eligible to vote to participate in this process.
So would it be a correct statement then to say that input from, I guess, I mean, so is there any invalid input? Could that be possible? Like if I mean, someone who's visiting from another country and here as a tourist, that probably is not going to be valid input, I imagine, right?
I think that's up to you. You probably don't want to weight that very heavily in your process.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
So there, I mean, I'm sorry, just to put a final point in it. So statutorily, there's no like law that says like only these people or only this type of input or anything like that, right? It's up to us as a commission to determine what the weight and credibility of any of this input will have in our process.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will just share that for us, we didn't ask whether people were citizens or eligible to vote in our process, but we did ask if they were residents, and we asked them where they lived, because we also wanted to make sure that geographically we were being representative. And, you know, we did get some people to fill out our survey that didn't live in our city, that were in a neighboring city. And we collected the data, but we did choose to omit that data when we presented it to our council.
Are you able to provide us with that quick survey thing that you were giving to your people, to your in your outreach? To track your demographic?
Sure, I can do that.
And just to add on to this point about whether you're only weighting heavily residents, I've worked in jurisdictions where there were business owners who wanted to share their community, their business districts interests, even though they were not residents of the jurisdiction, and that was still taken seriously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Before we close out completely, Marguerite, did you want to present anything on the timeline that you mentioned?
Yes, and Chair Brame, I'm going to go through this very quickly because we're in a period of evolution and development. I want to thank Jackie and Ginger just tremendously for the information that you provided today. Thank you very much.
And on behalf of the commission, thank you as well, because that's a lot. And I hope you won't mind if we come back to you for some follow-up.
Thank you. So this is a little timeline update. We happened to grab a slide at our last training, and this is an update from the slide. The interesting thing was our meeting was on the 11th, and on the 12th, the Census Bureau came out with an announcement that the redistricting data isn't going to be delivered until the likely the 30th of September. The exact date is still uncertain, but it's months later than we anticipated. Given the other data processing, if there are no changes, it's going to shove mapping into further into the fall of 2021. The deadline for adoption of maps is still December 15th, 2021, but legislation has been introduced. It's essentially a spot bill now, stating an intent of the legislature to address the timing issues surrounding the delay of the census. As of today, other than a statement of intent, that legislation has no content. And there are many interested parties, certainly our commission, and I'm working closely with staff on fail-safe deadlines if even the legislation fails. So we will be armed and ready to go with that. But we have had contact also from the Los Angeles Commission expressing an interest in monitoring this issue. And of course, every city, county, school district, and other commission in the state is interested. And we will keep you updated as matters develop.
Very good. Thank you for that. So unless there are any further questions or comments, Commissioner Chen, please.
Just briefly, and I'm sure people share the same thought. If we're concerned about credibility of this process, rushing the process because of the late census data would certainly make us look not credible. So we need to do everything we can to address that issue.
Thank you for that. And I'm hoping, starting with the next agenda item, we'll be able to address a fair bit of that. But for now, very good. Thanks again to the guests. Marguerite, thank you for that update. Very, very useful. We now move on then to the next agenda item, Ad Hoc Committee Reports, an opportunity for a representative of each of our current 4 ad hoc committees to provide very brief reports. I'd ask other commissioners to keep their questions or comments brief, bearing in mind that we have 4 full reports to hear, and there's no action to be taken today. Before we turn to the presentations, let me ask Andrew if there are any requests from the public to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Yes, there's one request to speak on this item.
Please.
All right, I'd like to invite forward, pull up the spreadsheet here. It was Mary Thompson. Mary, you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission. And I would ask that you please state your name for the audio record. And if there are any other individuals that wish to address the commission on this item, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom and we'll be happy to acknowledge you. Mary, you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Mary Thompson, Civil Engagement Chair with the League of Women Voters, North County, San Diego. I really want to thank you for this opportunity to comment. I'm speaking on Agenda Item 3C, the Ad Hoc Committee Report on Commissioner Training. The committee's methodical approach to commissioner training is commendable. However, in considering training, the League would encourage you to expand the diversity of sources of training, particularly as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. For this critical aspect of IRC's work, training by a VRA legal expert is strongly encouraged. The 2020 California Redistricting Commission received Voting Rights Act training presented by Justin Levitt, professor of law at Loyola Marymount University, Loyola Law School. Professor Levitt is a nationally recognized scholar of constitutional law and redistricting. His November presentation on voting rights and racially polarized voting is viewable using the link submitted in my e-comments. The League of Women Voters believes training by a variety of experts reinforces IRC's commitment to hearing from a range of perspectives. We recommend that you invite Professor Levitt to present to the IRC, giving you an opportunity for an interactive dialogue on this critical topic. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, any other members of the public that wish to address the commission on this item, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom and we'll be happy to call on you. Chair Boehm, seeing no movement in the participant panel, that concludes public comment on this item.
Very good, thank you. So we'll now turn to the first of the 2 ad hoc committees that have been working on RFPs. I'll ask Commissioner Ken Inman for his update on the Demographic Services RFP ad hoc committee. Just as a reminder to commissioners, the details for what the purposes of these committees as we approve them are in the item 3 attachment that was emailed to everyone yesterday and is now posted on the website as such. If we need to discuss that as reminders, happy to, but for right now, let me turn to Commissioner Inman.
Yeah, thank you. So our committee is composed of Commissioners Hanson, myself, and Commissioner Larson. Larson is our RFP expert. We're moving as quickly as possible. We've had more than our fair share of meetings over the last week. We're moving with speed because of 2 reasons. One is we want to make sure and have as broad a selection of contractors as possible. And so the further you push out a selection for something like this, the thinner that pool is going to become, because we're not the only redistricting commission out there that's competing for these resources. And the other one is we don't really have to wait for census data to actually start some analysis that needs to be done. There's foundational analysis around the existing districts that clearly we can start on prior to getting the next set of census data. There's ACS data, there's voting data, there's mapping communities of interest. As we get this feedback for these communities of interest, we want to see, well, where are they actually in relationship to existing boundaries? So there are quite a few tasks so we can start as soon as we get this person on board. So with that said, we're targeting March 25th as the meeting where we hope to have a complete RFP for review and hopefully approval by the IRC. That gives us sufficient time to work through an industry day, which we're working with staff right now to put together. That gives us sufficient time to work through developing the other exhibits that go along with statement of work, along with a scoring routine. And to that end, Commissioner Larson is actually going to start working with procurement as soon as we can arrange that so that we can look at the other exhibits that actually need to go with the RFP. The next, if you will, it's the next steps after the statement of work. We have turned in our statement of work to staff. Staff's going to review that. We'll get feedback. We're also sharing that statement of work with the other RFP group because there actually is an interaction between these two contractors. We want to make sure that in the statement of work, we're talking about how they need to work together to provide the best outcome for the IRC. We also want to make sure that we're clear on roles and responsibilities, and then we have common language across the two RFPs. So that's why we're sharing these documents across the two groups. We're doing that through staff to facilitate that interaction. And that's my update, unless Commissioner Larson, Commissioner Hanson have anything else.
No comment here. Thank you so much.
You've said it well. Thanks.
Good.
Ta-da!
Thank you very much. Any questions from other commissioners? Excellent. Commissioner, all three of you, thank you so much. That was really highly helpful to understand both the substance and the process of where you're going. I'll turn now then to the Outreach and Engagement Services RFP and Commissioner Amy Katerina. Again, the purpose is listed in the attachment, but Commissioner Katerina, please go ahead.
I think Sonia was going to do the presentation today.
I am sorry. Now she's shaking her head too.
I do apologize. I sent an email to you around regarding this. If you may, Commissioner, I think you have the most updated information. Thank you.
No problem. I like to talk. So we have had 3 meetings. Like Commissioner Inman's team, we've been very busy. We met 3 different occasions, and our goal was to complete the statement of work, which is encompassed in Exhibit A, in draft form, of course, and submit that to the county, which we did do. And that was in advance of working on the flyer for Industry Day, which we're also planning to have in the coming weeks. We don't have a set date yet. So those are the pieces that are done. Next steps are going to be participating in the Industry Day, and then also working on the completion of the remainder of the RFP documents. And I could talk about this for a long time because we spent a lot of time working on it, but I think I'm going to pause here, and then if people have questions, we can address those at the end. And I thank Commissioners Diaz and Garcia for being very flexible. We've spent hours on this, and I think we have a good working team, and working with staff has been amazing. So grateful all around for everyone's cooperation and participation.
Very good. Any questions or comments? Excellent. So we will move on then to the Ad Hoc Committee on Commissioner Training with a presentation, I understand, from Commissioner Pons. Please go ahead.
Yes, we're going to present the slides or the document that was sent out as a read ahead. Great, outstanding. So first of all, I want to thank the staff for their tremendous support in pulling together this brief. Also, thanks to my fellow committee members for brainstorming on this issue. And I want to finally acknowledge the relevant training that we've had to date, because it has been relevant and it has been applicable. So this effort was first a focus on the process, i.e. the structure and the format, and then secondly, the content, which we believe if we get the process correctly, the content will logically flow within that process. So again, for the members, Commissioner Inman, Brown, and Hanson, thank you very much. So there's the restated purpose. And we stated this purpose before we got the input from the staff. And this is our purpose. And it's to develop a tailored, flexible, and a focused training continuum, because it's a process that continues from tooth to tail, and to create a repository, i.e. a database of training material that will enable the commission to execute its mission, roles, and responsibilities so that we can be both effective and efficient in executing our duties. Of note, we already know that we have a link with substantive training resources already posted. It just needs to be better organized and user-friendly to support what we consider to be the proposed training continuum. Next slide. So this slide talks about the framework. So the framework is, go ahead and click to the next one, please. Yeah, so the framework we used was the 5 Whiskey Hotel construct. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. The who, what, when, where, why, and the how. And we use that in developing the training structure, the format, and as I stated earlier, eventually the content. So who? It's the audience, it's the commission, the subcommittees, and other potential interest groups that may pop up. The what? The topics. The topics should be tailored and focused on that target audience that I talked about earlier, and the who. The when. This is the periodicity. There are 2 instances. First would be routinely, and that would be aligned and synchronized with our schedule. And then the second periodicity would be just in time, and that would be as needed. Whether it's a pop-up on the schedule or somebody on the commission say, listen, we need either initial training or refresher training on a topic. So if you recall back in January, I think it was the 14th, line item 5 it was, we got a brief on the 2021 milestone and timelines. That was sufficient then, but we don't think it's sufficient now. And that's what we think we need some help from the staff to realign and to categorize and to label that training, that schedule of milestones and timelines so that we can align the training to complement that. So the where in this process, well, the where would be remotely because of the restrictions put on us by COVID. And eventually we'll have on-site training in accordance with the medical and safety protocols. The why, well, that's obvious. It's about planning and preparation. You know, we don't have the luxury and we don't have the leisure to have a dedicated training phase before we do our business. But we have to equip ourselves as an informed body in order to be effective and a productive body. So how do we do the training? It can be directed to us as a commission like it was today and like it has been, or we think there's benefit in doing self-study training, posting the material online. So us, those of you who are really self-starters can go and do your self-study, or you can look at it in advance of directed study so that we can have some really engaging and insightful discussions on the topic itself. And last but not least, we think this process really does support good time management. Let's go to the next slide, please. So no plan would be complete without action. So we sort of divided up in 2 different groups. First, the actions have been identified and directed toward the staff. We asked them to disseminate the training topics to the commission. I think it has been pushed out. I got it yesterday, I think it was. And also, like I said, to use that 14 January timeline and milestone brief to create a phased redistricting process that utilize discrete segments, timelines, categories, and topics. If you would click on that link, it'll take you to an example of what we're talking about. Click on redistricting process. So this is just an exemplar of what we think that process will look like in the absence of those milestones and those timelines. Beneath that milestone and timeline would be the stages and phases of the training. I just called it orientation, discovery, decision, mapping, public testimony, the final report, and then on and on and on. That's to be determined based on the established phases by the staff. The next thing would be the categories for training. administrative, and the list goes on. And beneath the categories would go the topics. And so go back to the previous slide by clicking on the link above, redistricting process example. Yes. So the material and the topics and the categories that we think would be relevant would be one, historic references all the way down to public hearings. That information is out there. We've got a lot of good ideas already and recommendations on some of the topics and the categories. And then once we figure out what those topics and categories are, then we would ask everyone to contribute information in the form of content, links, and even propose guest speakers to help us move this thing forward and make it comprehensive. We recognize that training is not a stop-start, it is continuous and it is ongoing. Next slide. The next actions are targeting the commission. Like I said earlier, we would like for you to help us to propose and create training categories and topics. And if you could get that to us by the 11th of March, that would help us to meet the end date, which is the 25th of March, which I'll talk about later. And also to start thinking about some of the training resources and the content for that repository / database. And if you could contribute that to us and provide it to us and the staff by 11 March, that would also help us to meet that 25 March timeline. And then we get to the ad hoc committee itself, that's us. We would review and approve your inputs by 19 March. And we envision just standing down on the 25th of March. But because we know this is a training continuum, we would reconvene as necessary, either the original group or adding additional members as required to support what we consider to be in-stride training adjustments. So again, I want to thank the other commissioners for helping to brainstorm on this and for us to pull it together. And next up, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Hanson, and she's going to present additional information regarding the potential training topics and the content. And following her, we can entertain any questions and comments. Over to you, Commissioner Hanson.
Thanks so much. One of the first things we did was we asked the county to forward to the committee members the document that is included in your packet for this week. And is there another chart to show that was in Frank's slides? Anyway, that document lists a lot of resources that are available online. They're podcasts of specific redistricting experiences that have been, you can just show that one you just had on there. Oops. Anyway, we realized, my background is in education, and we realized that there's more than one way to approach training. One is in-group training with a speaker, all members are present and all hear the same words. But we know that not all people download the information in the same way. And so other means of communicating are always a good idea. And this chart that is in your packet suggests certain resources that you can use. And after the staff sent us this chart, I went through and watched all of the trainings that were free. Could you go back to the first page, please? These by the national state legislatures include redistricting webinars. The one that is not the first one, because that one you have to pay for, but the second box, redistricting webinar series #1, redistricting data, is free. It's about an hour, and it talks about all the other sources of research that you can use while you're waiting for the census. And then the second one, redistricting software vendor presentation, allows 4 different presenters to show their software and how it works. And both of those were very, very helpful. Next page. All those trainings under the Rose Institute involve, in many of them, Marguerite, who is our counsel, and they look back over the process, beginning with the census and going through how the redistricting state level commission is operating. One on the Voting Rights Act, and the last one is on local redistricting. Each of those is about an hour. They're very useful. Some of them you think, oh, well, this is already passed, but it forms the foundation for what we are going to do. And then the last one in the bottom box is the redistricting workshop that was put on by Common Cause. And I know a lot of us have seen that. And that is a 3-hour commitment of time, but it's broken down into much smaller segments with lots of different presenters. If all of us would take time to take a look at these, I don't expect everybody's going to take the time to watch all of them, but it will create some sort of a baseline. One of the things we noticed or talked about the source of our list of topics was when we were very early in the process, and it was kind of like, well, who'd like to suggest a topic, but we never really pulled the group or knew whether it was something everyone needed or just a few people wanted. And so in order to really develop that list, we'd like to have ask everybody again after they've had a chance to look at some of these other resources, and then we can move forward. Just as an aside, today I did look at that training that was recommended by Mary Thompson, the speaker today, with it was Professor Levitt on the Voting Rights Act. It was excellent. And the presentation itself was only about 40 minutes, although there were questions and answers and a real insight into how the California Commission meetings are going that was just as interesting to me. So you should have that in a link from the email that was sent just this afternoon. So that's my suggestion on how we can kind of get up to date and form a solid basis of knowledge for everybody.
Sure.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson. So we all know that training is critically important, and just as important as the training that we conduct is when we conduct that training. I mean, it just can't be, willy-nilly. It has to be aligned and linked to something. And we think it should be aligned and linked to the milestones and timelines that were given to us in January. And that makes sense. But we also recognize there would be training that would be necessary based on things that may pop up. And that's just in time training. We're all familiar with that. But this gives us the flexibility to do both without, creating too much pressure on our own personal time and on the process itself. So flexibility is key, focus is key, and targeting the audience and making sure that it's like the speaker that was talking earlier, she said, look, make sure you reach out and make sure you bring in guest speakers that would be relevant to the discussion and relevant to the phase that we're in. And so that's all we have for now, and we'll stop and entertain any questions and comments.
And before we move on, I just wanted to provide one point of clarification about the request for the full commission to provide input on the training topics. Those should be, if that's going to be on the agenda for the next meeting, those suggestions can be provided to staff, and staff can organize those and make that list available. But because of the Brown Act concerns, the input from the full commission needs to either be, it needs to be discussed in a public meeting.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Which I think tracks fine, and I'll ask staff to just take note and be able to put things together, working with the ad hoc committee. So if there's an agenda item ripe for discussion, we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting, subject to discussion by the ad hoc committee and staff.
And that would be consistent with the process the commission has already used, for example, for the suggestions with respect to the formation of ad hoc committees.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Commissioners Ponce and Hanson. I see Vice Chair Diaz, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ponce, for your presentation, and Commissioner Hanson. Very informative. I just wanted to see how it dovetails with the public trainings, or if you see them parallel. Our training as commissioners versus what the public's going to be receiving as training? Or are they one and the same? And will this repository of information be made available publicly of all the trainings that we attend? And where is that going to be?
The location is the link that exists now. It just needs to be better organized into some sort of categories that you don't have to hunt and search for what you want to find. And if you identify it by categories, if it's in a general category like the Brown Act, you can go there and find it. If it's a legal issue, you can go there and find it. If it's associated with like drawing the map, mapping, then when we get to that phase, everything associated with mapping, the training and the education process would be located there. So if you want to do it in advance of getting to that phase or that stage, you can do it. So it is linked to that. The thing that you asked about the general public training, it's not interdependent. I don't think we should be wedded to the public's training, and I don't think the public should be wedded to our training. I think, again, you should be independent steaming on what you think is relevant to your level of knowledge in order for you to execute your duties. And as a public, that's looking over our shoulders to make sure we do our job correctly, and I'm sure we will. Transparency. As far as the public-facing documents, I'm not sure. I'll leave that up to the legal experts. I don't know what's legal and illegal, but freedom of information would allow everything to be accessible, and I don't think anything should be behind the curtain. So I think everything should be public-facing. Over.
It was my understanding that this would be on our website, which is accessible to everyone. So on the website, there is a group of documents. Some of them might be videos, some of them might be print material, whatever. It would be just as available to anybody as they are to us.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that. So then our final update will be from the Ad Hoc Committee on Redistricting, Outreach, and Communication. For that, I'll turn to Commissioner Garcia, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Bain. So I'm here to report on the Outreach and Communications Ad Hoc Committee. And it was quite informative and I think very relevant for our committee to have heard the training that we got tonight on outreach to communities of interest. And we heard from them that it is our duty, we're obligated to take affirmative steps to engage the media and the public. And that's what we're working on in our committee. It's our goal to develop a communications plan for the IRC to use in the interim period before we bring on the contractor, which the RFP Ad Hoc Committee is working on. I'm also on that committee. And that contractor isn't anticipated to be brought on board until late May or early June. The members of our committee are Commissioner Bain, Commissioner Katerina, and Commissioner Serban. And we've had a couple of really productive meetings and more scheduled for next week. Our goal is to produce a sort of a two-pronged communications plan. One prong will outline a standard process for responding to requests from media and from the public, from community organizations. Some of that has already happened, and it looks like we need to develop sort of a better process for responding. Just as a point of information, our bylaws specify that the chair is the sole official spokesperson of the IRC, although the chair can designate this responsibility to others. Our thought on the committee is to develop a process that is inclusive and will empower other commissioners to engage with the public and the media. The second prong of this communications plan will deal with outreach that is initiated by the IRC. We think that the IRC need not wait until early summer to start engaging with the public after we have a consultant. The message we like to convey to the public now is that although the census data are delayed, we are not. Our work is now, our work is ongoing, and we're here and we want to hear we are here and we're eager to hear from the public. So that's what, how that, what that will look like, how we will do that. That's what we're working on. The other thing that we're working on, if we are to start engaging with the public, educating them and listening to them, the commissioners are going to need resources so that we can be as effective as we need to be. So we're working on developing communication materials such as talking points, FAQs, and key messages. And then finally, in sort of generating that action plan, if you will, we discovered that we really need a lot more information. And we've generated a pretty extensive list of questions for staff. You got a lot of this information in a handout that was in the package, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. But we need, and we're sort of wondering, what are we doing? What's the current status of our outreach? What did the county do in 2010 in the last redistricting process? Are there some resources or tools that were developed then that we, could avail ourselves of now? What can we stand up now? What county resources are available to us now that we can use? It would not serve us well on the committee if we were to make all these plans and then find out that, we actually don't have the tools to activate any of those plans. We need to find out, we're, trying to figure out who our communities of interest are, how do we, how do we get that information? And then finally, I want to say that what I can tell, having looked through the training ad hoc committee materials and from their presentation tonight, is that there's some overlap between what we're doing and what they're doing. One of the things that we are considering is that the commissioners might need some public speaking training. So that might be something that we would, I don't know, kick over to the training commission, training committee to think about. And then they mentioned the website and making sure that there's training materials on that website. And that's one of the things that we're also looking at that's within our purview is the website and what's there and are we providing all the information both for the IRC and for the public at that website. So there's some overlap there and more conversations to be had. But I think we've established conversations with the staff. We're planning to meet with the county communications office to figure out what kind of resources we have available to us and what the capabilities of the county are. And our plan is to bring some proposed action that we can take, I believe at the March 11th meeting, although I don't believe we'll have all of our work completed by then, maybe by the end of March. But our committee has been charged with developing a communications plan throughout the interim period until we onboard a consultant. So more to come on that. And then again, thanks to the rest of the committee members, and I don't know if they have anything that they'd like to add. Commissioner Bain?
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. Any questions or comments from the entire group? Commissioner Pons.
Yes, nicely done, Commissioner Garcia and the rest of your committee. I do agree with you. There's synergy. I don't know if it's overlap, but it's one word or another. There is synergy between not only the two groups that we've talked about, the two committee and our efforts, but all of the other committees as well. And so I think at the end of the day, we may want to think about creating an executive steering committee that ties all this together all these interdependencies and some of this synergy together so that it makes sense and is logical. That's just something we may want to think about, because if we all try to tie it together with all these great ideas, it may not get tied together appropriately. So great job, great content. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you for that. Before we turn to our next agenda item, I did want to ask Barbara and Hillary if they had any overall comments or reactions based on the presentations and discussion.
Hillary, did you have anything?
No, everyone has, presented their information well, and I think everyone's clear on that. The presentations today were informational, and to the extent there's action items, those will come back before the commission at a later date, and it sounds like that might be the commission's next meeting.
And then I'll just add, Chair Bain, that staff are here to support in any way we can. So whether it's sharing some of that information, providing the details, whatever we can do and research. So it's been a pleasure getting to know some of you a little bit better through the ad hoc. So I appreciate all the hard work. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, I was remiss in not actually acknowledging how hard we have our committee has leaned on Barbara and staff, and I just want to thank you, I think on behalf of our committee, and how responsive you've been and how helpful you've been. So thank you.
My guess is that's true for all the committees, as they said it and didn't, so much appreciated, but thank you very much.
And Barbara, you don't have to feel like you have to respond to my emails that are like at 11 at night and stuff. So.
But I did want to thank all the presenters. I did want to thank all the commissioners who are participating in these ad hoc committees. I wanted to again thank the previous ad hoc committee for setting a great model for everyone and keep encouraging inputs, not necessarily just by serving on a committee, but providing the kind of inputs that commissioners requested or suggested through staff to keep that participation going. So thank everyone for that. Moving on. We'll now proceed to item 4 on the agenda for today's commission's business, which involves at least one specific action item and maybe one or two others. To begin the discussion, Barbara will summarize the staff report on the processes used for the chair and vice chair selection and the state of, or what we've learned about rotations in other jurisdictions. The plan then will be for our commission to have an opportunity to discuss and act on 3 options, at least one of which we need to take action on, to ensure that the commission works as effectively and inclusively with regard to commissioners as possible. Number 1, to potentially extend the chair and vice chair interim period that ends on February 28th. That's the must-do item. We have to make some sort of decision on who will be chair and vice chair as of February 28th. The optional options for today, in addition to that one, are to potentially select a new interim or permanent chair or vice chair today or begin that process, as well as to consider what a potential rotation of chair and vice chair might look like. Now, there may be other options to ensure maximum effectiveness and inclusiveness, and we can certainly include that in the discussion. But given all the great work and research that went into that staff report, I think it's appropriate, in fact, necessary, to hear from Barbara and the team first. Barbara, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bain. So as requested at the last meeting, the staff report does include information on how others, including the California Redistricting Commission or CRC, are handling the selection and or rotation process. So I'm just going to briefly cover some of the highlights of the staff report. Staff researched 7 cities and counties and the CRC to examine the selection of chair and vice chair. The CRC appears to be the only commission of those research to have rotation in place. The County of Los Angeles was the only local jurisdiction research that considered a rotation, but ultimately chose to name permanent positions. The CRC rotates chair and vice chair at every meeting and has adopted a rotation schedule that ensures that 2 be from different political parties as required by the California Constitution and considers gender and balance of workload.
Although no redistricting examples were found, rotation of chair and vice chair has also been implemented by region with the General Assembly of the UN Administrative and Budgetary Committees as an example. For an IRC rotation, the commission can choose to revisit, as the chair mentioned, the selection of chair and vice chair as an agenda item at some future interval, or the IRC could set a rotation schedule for the remainder of the year. The commission can also determine not to implement a rotation period for the chair or vice chairs. Some of the ideas for a rotation included in the staff report are rotation among commissioners from each of the 5 supervisorial districts, rotation among interested or volunteer commissioners, rotations assigned by random drawing from a pool of commissioners, from a pool of interested or volunteer commissioners, or from subpools formed on relevant criteria. You could also form an ad hoc committee to determine a rotation process or rotation by some other factors determined by the commission. As for the selection of the chair and vice chair, limited information was available. The County of Santa Barbara made the selection using nomination, which was the process initially used by your commission to select the current chair and vice chair. The County of Los Angeles was more complicated by naming 2 co-chairs and giving commissioners 2 votes each round of voting. And as mentioned, the interim period of the commission's current chair and vice chair does end on February 28th. So today is the final regular meeting in that interim period. The staff report also presents a variety of means to choose a chair and vice chair, which also includes a call for nomination, call for volunteers, forming an ad hoc committee to nominate a chair and vice chair, or some other method determined by the commission. So in closing, the commission has to name a chair and vice chair today to become effective March 1st to comply with the commission's bylaws, regardless of any decisions regarding rotation. And the commission could select a chair and vice chair permanently or for another interim period, or is subject to rotation as desired. And so county staff is here to support and assist the commission in implementing the leadership selection process that you determine, help facilitate the work of the chair and the vice chair that are selected. And that concludes my remarks, and I'll send it back to you, Chair Bain.
Thank you very much for that, Barbara. In keeping with our standard, I wanted to invite clarifying questions, but for right now, just clarifying questions on the staff report and related issues. I promise we'll have a very fulsome discussion on all this. Commissioner Krugliak.
Are you open to, if it were one of the options on the table, are you interested and open to maintaining the chair? Or is this something that, having done it for 2 months, that you are no longer interested in?
I'm embarrassed to say I love it. I'm enjoying it, and I would be more than happy to continue if that's what sees fit. But, and I have prepared remarks on this that I will now delete, it is much more important to me that we have a process that commissioners are comfortable with, and that we've thought through options as well as other ways to empower and take advantage of the great wisdom in the room.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
Got to unmute. Been on mute for a while. I was going to ask the same thing because I think you've done an outstanding job. And the other thing is, I don't know if there's anyone else that's interested even in taking on that position. So if there is, then maybe we need to do some discussion. But if there isn't, you know, I would be fine with you continuing all the way through to the end. So that's just my input.
Thank you. Very kind. Again, we'll certainly have an opportunity to explore and take nominations and self-nominations as we go. Commissioner Serban, then Commissioner Hanson.
Sorry. So I think the rotating chair idea, this idea of having a different chair at each meeting, I'm more interested in how we might implement that once we start holding our public hearings, since we are required to, I think, hold at least one in each district. I don't know if we're required to hold one in each district, but I think what we're probably going to do is hold one in each district. And maybe once we do that, I would be interested in maybe having a discussion where that meeting would then be chaired and vice chaired by the commissioners who are of that district. for purposes of these types of meetings where we're conducting sort of like our internal business and not necessarily doing this like public outreach stuff, like it's not really a public hearing. I do recognize that the function of the chair will, you know, being the chair, you set the agenda and you do a lot of, you know, you will end up steering the direction of this committee in many ways. So I'm open to discussing a rotation, but I feel I'm not sure, like other commissioners have said, whether we even have interest from others or whether it would be whether the benefit of having a rotating chair would outweigh whatever the downside of like lack of continuity and the rest of those other things. Over.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I should say, again, first, I want to keep this segment just on clarifying questions, but it raises, I think, a really good point that I suspect the answer is no, we didn't see anything. But Barbara, in staff's research, did anything turn up on how other commissions are planning to run their hearings or other meetings besides the formal meetings of their commission?
No, not to that detail, but we can definitely go back and do, and some of the other commissions may be in the same, but we are trying to kind of figure it out and figure out what that might mean. So we're happy to keep an eye on it and do some additional research.
And for what it's worth, Commissioner Serban, I had exactly the same thought. Whoever's chairing the regular meetings, I think for the hearings, especially in the districts, but any other hearings too, that those meetings should be run by people familiar with that audience and people who are ready to spend the time and prepare. And I don't think whoever the chair is of the regular commission and the commission meetings, that has to be restricted. Commissioner Diaz, Vice Chair Diaz, did you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to chime in. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but the role of the vice chair is very important as well. You may see me, I may seem like I'm in the background, but I'm very much involved hands-on behind the scenes in these meetings. And David could tell you, we've spent hours with staff planning agendas. And because our schedule is twice a month, it doesn't really give us a lot of breathing room in between, probably only about 3 days I get rest. And then all the emails start popping up. So I really appreciate, I just wanted to just say, Chair Bain, I really appreciate the fact that you've been sort of like my mentor as well. And I have the feelings mutual because we share and bounce off a lot of ideas with how to run meetings. And I really appreciate the fact that last time I had an opportunity to present an item on the agenda. So this body, I just want to put that out there that this is a shared role. Leadership role. And, I will say though, that I didn't realize how much time it actually took. And now that I'm a member of an ad hoc committee, it's even more time that it took up for my schedule. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to step down from my role as vice chair because I also have a full-time job and I wanna devote 100% of my time into the ad hoc RFP process because that's our most pressing task right now. So this is sort of my announcement to open it up to anyone who wants to be our vice chair, a new vice chair, but I think we have to have some kind of motion on the floor to start that process and whatever decision that this commission decides.
Thank you for that. And I'll reserve comment on that for now, other than I think it's clear on my face, but thank you. Thank you very much. All right, before we go into discussion, let me just see, are there any other clarifying questions for staff report? Because I do want to see if there are public comment, and then we'll get into the full discussion. Commissioner Hanson, please.
I want to share the belief in the great job you have both done in guiding us this far. And the fact that it seems to me to be very disruptive in what's already kind of a disruptive process, especially because we only meet every 2 weeks and we're meeting virtually. My question is, how much time and energy would it take for you, who is the current commission or chair, to train the next chair? And what kind of learning would that person have to get in order to be able to step in for however the length of time is?
It's a very good question, and it's one that's on my mind. I would certainly do everything I could to free up time, and I think Vice Chair Diaz would as well, to mentor and share experience. I spend roughly 6 to 10 hours a week on chair duties outside of the meetings. That's the way I work, though, and that's not the way it would necessarily work for anyone else. But it's certainly something to go through. And I think Vice Chair Diaz made a very good point. Some of it depends on having that good relationship where you can bounce ideas off one another. And my guess is several of you are having that same experience in the ad hocs. Heaven knows I've made plenty of mistakes, but I would have made plenty more if I hadn't been able to talk through them with Sonia or Barbara or fellow ad hoc commissioners or just other commissioners. We can go into that in more detail, but for right now, let me ask Andrew first. Are there any requests from the public to comment?
Thank you, Chair Bam. There are no requests to speak on this item.
I didn't think so. All right. So in that sense, I think we're already starting into the discussion a little bit. I frankly would rather keep opening it up. So I will try to just keep the discussion moving and keep track of who's speaking when, and we can go on from there. I do think now we in effect face 2 separate actions. One is, what are we going to do for March 11th? Is that to extend at least my tenure and maybe we have the vice chair vacant, or separate motion? Maybe we have a call for nominations and even a vote tonight on vice chair, or chair and vice chair to be determined at that next meeting. And there are ways we could have the March 11th meeting without extending the tenure, but it might be a little difficult because there's so much going on right now. I would want to make sure that new chair is fully empowered and prepared. Okay, let me take Commissioner Russ, then Dostal, then Chen. Commissioner Russ, please.
All right, thank you. The idea of that the California Redistricting Commission has a rotating chair and vice chair of every meeting, that frightens me. That would be, I don't think that would be workable at all. And then the idea of the LA Commission having 2 co-chairs, I think is also very problematic. I am very much in favor of continuing on with a chair and a vice chair that would not necessarily be interim, because I think we've gotten to know each other. We've gotten to know pretty much as far as we can, not meeting in person. But I've been very pleased, obviously, with you, Commissioner Boehm. Your experience in the diplomatic corps is obviously has shown through. And certainly, if we're going to open up the floor for nominations, I would like to be the first to renominate you as chair.
Thanks very much. Boy, this is awkward. Okay, but thank you.
But I wanted to nominate you.
Yeah, and we should. All right, let me take Commissioner Dostal.
I kind of did just by the question, just to throw that out there.
I'm going to summon the Leone doctrine and just make sure we get cookies for everybody who's been nominating. This is good. Let me take Commissioner Dostal and Commissioner Chen and then see if we want to do a motion of some kind along that line or along something else. But I did promise those 2 first. Commissioner Dostal.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. First of all, I want to say also that I would second the nomination to have you continue as chair. I do like the idea that has been floated and talked about a little bit about having a permanent chair for the meetings and rotating chairs is suggested for the public hearings. The other point I wanted to make, or suggestion I wanted to make, is that we have a call for volunteers for the vice chair. That way, if we have somebody interested or only one person interested, that makes it easy to do our, motion to nominate and elect the chair and vice chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Chen.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse, David. It sounds like we're moving toward you being the permanent chair. What I might recommend is we test to see how many people are interested in the vice chair position, and maybe rotate between those interested parties for the remainder of the commission, and maybe address both issues that way.
Commissioner Garcia, was that a hand?
Sorry, I was just agreeing with that recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chen. Before we form a formal motion then, which I think we're getting close to, first, I really do mean it. I very much appreciate the kind words, but if someone wants to put themselves forward, or if there's someone else you would like to put forward for chair, I think we should not be shutting a door to that discussion. I do want to just offer to pick up something Commissioner Pons said earlier regarding an executive committee. I'm not sure about a committee itself because of the standing committee idea, but the Los Angeles model spurred a thought in me about not necessarily co-chairs. I tend to agree that's problematic, but that there might be value either sooner down the road in multiple vice chairs who would have specific lanes and in effect ensure continuity for any ad hoc committees we develop. So for instance, we could have a vice chair for engagement, outreach. We could have a vice chair for demography and mapping. We could have a vice chair for resources and administrative issues. The reason I say that, and I'm not asking for an immediate reaction from staff or council on it, is that I could see a way that such a group would need to meet before meetings in order to do the kind of preparation that Vice Chair Diaz was talking about with regard to prepping the agenda and things like that. I'm not sure that would constitute a meeting that had to be visible under Brown Act considerations. But even if it did, it might be a good enough combination of more leadership opportunities and clearing the decks for effective commissioner discussion. I only offer that because it affects a little bit what we do with regard to vice chair. If we want to have vice chair volunteers today and have a vote today or on March 11th, that's certainly fine, and we can revisit the issue later. That might be the simplest way forward. So with that in mind, unless there are any other comments, if I'm understanding right, we should have motion, sorry.
So I believe Commissioner Katarina had her hand up.
I'm very sorry. I didn't even, there we go. It's fading into the, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Sorry, I should have stepped up. I think I love that idea. I absolutely support you as permanent chair, David. I think you've done an amazing job and have been an inspiring leader for all of us. And I like this idea of having kind of the vice chairs in certain categories. So I support that. I support that idea.
Thank you for that. On a number of those, Commissioner Hanson.
In our our ad hoc committee about the RFP for demographer, we identified the need for someone to be the point person between any organization that has a subcontract or has a contract with us. And maybe that's where the vice chairman comes from, and it's basically what you're saying is that the major categories of action be used as topics that we would then have a vice chair in charge of.
Okay, thank you for that. And I should flag, it's just as possible to do an option along the lines of what Vice Chair Diaz said. You could have the chair and vice chair divide things up a bit, and the vice chair would take on certain roles. I'm certain that would be workable. We have the luxury of the principle I've mentioned before. I think all commissioners would be perfectly capable of serving as chair or vice chair. I think it's more a question of time and ability to fulfill the roles. So with that, I think maybe we could do, well, Andrew, tell me, should we take volunteers first or should we have a motion that allows us to take volunteers for
I
vice chair?
think what would be appropriate based on what we did a couple meetings ago with the selection process is you could entertain nominations for vice chair, and then based on those nominations, seek a motion for vice chair.
Okay. Would there be objection to, well, let's have that discussion first then, and
So
then we'll
instead of
have,
nominations, instead of no, can we just ask how many people would be interested in being a vice chair?
next thing I was going to ask. Good. Can we have just a show of hands? Okay, so Commissioner Garcia, make sure I see you. Commissioner Katerina? Just you two? Anyone else? Okay, good.
So I would recommend then that we just split the remaining time between the two commissioners who are interested and rotate it that way. Just a point of discussion, I'm not sure I see the value of creating vice chairs in lanes. I think that complicates things. I think we could accomplish the same thing without making them vice chairs per se. Just my thoughts.
And that's certainly a more reasonable point to be at tonight. I realize it might take a little more discussion. Okay, but when you can, Commissioner Chen, could you just clarify the first part of your statement? If we have two nominees or two people expressing interest,
Then I would say we rotate those two over the remainder of the commission's life, the expected life, and say one serves for 4 months and the other serves for 4 months.
well, Commissioner Serban, you have your hand up, sorry.
So I'd like to move that the vice chairperson position for the remaining regular meetings of the IRC are to be split between Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Katerina. That's the motion.
Okay. Without a specific time period.
Well, so for the remaining balance of our regular special or our regular meetings, I would propose that they would alternate between the two of them.
Ah, okay.
Can I just check in with council real quick? Our bylaws, I believe, only have is there anything we need to keep in mind for the bylaws, Hillary?
So the bylaws contemplate rotation. And so to the extent that the motion here is to have a rotating vice chair position, that's contemplated by the bylaws. The bylaws do not contemplate multiple vice chairs serving at the same time. And so the bylaws would need to be amended to accommodate that if that is the proposal.
Okay, I'm sorry. Allow me please to restate my motion. The motion then is to for Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Katerina to alternate as the appointed vice chair for the remaining balance of the IRC's regularly scheduled meetings. Did that come out right?
But yeah, I think it did. Before we vote on that, could I ask both David and Sonia to weigh in to say, would it be better to alternate every other month or something, or would it be better to have two time frames where they each serve for 5 months or something like that? What do you think would be more effective?
Before we turn to that, let me first call on Commissioner Dostal, who had a hand up, and then I'd like to see if Commissioner Katerina and Commissioner Garcia have any thoughts about that. Then Commissioner Vice Chair Diaz for her thoughts. So Commissioner Dostal first.
You covered what I was going to say. I wanted to hear from all three of those commissioners.
Good. Okay. Okay, so we'll hear from those three and then Commissioner Larson. Commissioner Garcia?
Well, actually, I was going to raise my hand actually to try and get some clarity on how this would work. It wasn't clear to me if we were talking about rotating every meeting, or it looks like the motion on the floor is, well, I'm still actually not sure where we landed. Did we land at 4 months and 4 months, or 5 months and 5 months? And I'm just trying to understand how that would actually work. And I'm wondering if it's going to make just the process more complicated, not only for us, but even for staff. I don't know. I just don't know how that's going to work.
And while I think your words and Commissioner Katerina's words will carry extra weight because you two are going to be in this, I think that's a valid point. I certainly wouldn't want either of you or any commissioner feel rushed on this. If we're not ready to make a decision today, I think we made enough progress that we could make it on at our next meeting if we needed to. Let me take Commissioner Katerina, Vice Chair Diaz, Commissioner Larson, and then Commissioner Krugliak. Commissioner Katerina, please.
Well, I can tell that Rosette and I are going to get along great because I'm in complete agreement. I think it's important to find out what both Commissioner Diaz and Commissioner Boehm think about, a rotating schedule. I think it's important to consider staff's role in this as well. I'm totally flexible. Whatever the board requires is acceptable to me. But I think it's important to listen to some of the folks who are doing the job now and who are interacting to help us make the best decision.
Thank you for that. So Vice Chair Diaz, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I guess I lean more towards continuity, just because 4 months can go by so fast. It's already gone by really fast for me in the interim. So it's just something to think about. And as you're working with staff, just being aware that, we're also working with legal counsel when we develop these meetings. And I guess I don't know, I've worked in other situations where I've been chairing other committees with 2 vice chairs. And it does work if it's well thought in a way where, one's focused on one area of, like in this case, it was programs and community involvement, cleanups and things like that. This was my community town council, and the other was the vice chair that was just membership and getting as many members as possible to our council. So I'm not sure how that would work in this framework. To get to your point, if we had 2 vice chairs at the same time, we know we can't do that. Our bylaws don't allow it, but to have them rotate, there has to be a continuity of the same roles and responsibilities from one vice chair to another. And because I'm the outgoing vice chair, I think that there should be some kind of training or succession kind of onboarding, I guess, if you will. And I'm more than happy to be that resource, but then keep in mind that the previous vice chair, after that vice chair leaves, there has to be some onboarding of that second vice chair. So just something to keep in mind. I will stop now because I'll probably ramble on, but
no, all valuable.
Hope that answers some questions that you might have.
So Commissioner Larson, then Commissioner Krugliak, then Commissioner Hanson.
Okay, to move this discussion along, I second Commissioner Serbane's motion. I think the 2 nominees can work this out themselves quite well. And we're talking about details here that they can sort out among themselves. So I call for a vote.
So can I then amend my motion then, Chair Boehm, to I'd like to amend my motion to be that the 2 that Commissioner Katerina and Commissioner Garcia are to alternate the vice chair position as they see fit. No?
It's an interesting motion. There's a bylaws issue with it. That's the main thing I'm thinking about. Let me keep taking speakers with the extreme appreciation to Commissioner Larson that we keep moving forward. That's where we want to get to a decision point on this if we can. So Commissioner Krugliak, then Commissioner Hanson.
I'm just looking at the bylaws, and it seems like we're coming to a pretty good consensus, and we can modify them with 9 of the 14 commissioners voting aye. I think we can amend the motion to modify the bylaws to allow 2 co-chairs and vote for the motion as it was originally done. And assuming that that's what the section 1 means, that they can be amended by a vote of 9 of the 14 commissioners.
We can certainly amend the bylaws, and I think if we worked on that a bit before the next meeting, we could be in a good position. So thank you for that valuable comment.
That was
Commissioner
exactly my comment.
Great. All right. So Commissioner Serban, do you want to amend the motion slightly? Or actually, I should just ask Andrew and Hillary, do we need to amend the motion given that there's an intent to amend the bylaws?
I'm going to defer to Hillary on that.
So the bylaws wouldn't currently permit the commission to take the action to appoint multiple vice chairs at this meeting. And amendment of the bylaws is not on the agenda for this meeting. And so the commission cannot act to amend the bylaws now. And so the commission right now has, pursuant to the current bylaws, has the option to appoint a single or a rotating vice chair position. Or it can revisit that action. It can appoint, one person now as an interim and then revisit that action after the bylaws have subsequently been amended, if that's what the desire to do is.
And I'm sorry to extend the conversation on this, but you said something important there early. Because the bylaws do allow and anticipate rotate, we could have a motion to approve Commissioners Garcia and Katerina to enter into a rotating arrangement for the vice chair position with details to be decided at our next meeting. Would that be an acceptable reading of the bylaws?
Yes, the bylaws don't require the commission to decide on rotation today. The commission should decide who will be the vice chair for now. So there is a vice chair in place as of March 1st, but then the commission can revisit at the next meeting how that rotation will work for the remainder of the redistricting process.
Okay, so let me try to frame it this way and make sure this is acceptable to commissioners as well as council and Andrew. I think then we need a motion that first extends the chair, because we still need that done. And second, subject to Commissioner Garcia and Katerina's agreement, would one of you be willing to be, quote unquote, the vice chair from this meeting with the explicit understanding that we will get the rotation system decided at our next meeting? Would it be possible for one of you to just go forward for the purposes of the next meeting? Either one of you want to be the one to do it so we can just encapsulate it?
Commissioner Garcia, I'm totally open.
And just to chime in, I'm happy to use my randomizer if that would be a useful tool.
Let's do it. 2-person randomizer. I want to see how it works.
Whatever.
David, because we had a motion on the floor that was seconded, do we have to modify that motion, or how do we do this?
We can modify it, or we can offer a substitute motion, particularly if the motioner, Commissioner Serban, is willing.
Yeah, let's just clean it up and do a substitute.
Okay. Andrew, do you have a name?
Just give me one moment here. Let me delete out the other names.
Can we restate the motion before the vote's called?
That's just what I'm writing down.
All right, we have Commissioner Katerina came up first.
Very good. So I think the motion that I would think would do it would be something like a motion to approve David Boehm as chair or Commissioner Boehm as chair and Commissioner Katerina as vice chair, with the understanding that the vice chair rotation will be detailed and discussed at our next meeting. How does that sound to everyone?
Good.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Mm-hmm. A motion to approve Commissioner Boehm as the chair and Commissioner Katerina as vice chair, with the understanding that the details of the vice chair rotation, and we can include with Commissioner Garcia if we need to name her in it, will be discussed and decided at our next meeting.
I would just make a minor suggestion
Please.
to that, which is to, with respect to the vice chair position, the motion would be to approve a rotating vice chair position with Commissioner Katarina to serve as the first vice chair, with the rotation scheduled to be determined at the next meeting.
And is there a way to include Commissioner Garcia by name at this time also?
Yeah, if we do it that way, I think we should. So approve a rotating vice chair that will begin with Commissioner Katarina and rotated with Commissioner Garcia. Hillary, does that work?
Yes, I think that's fine. And then with the additional line that the rotation schedule is to be determined at the commission's next meeting.
Should be with the rotation schedule to be determined at the next meeting, and we'll include that as an action item for the next agenda. All right. I can make that motion, or if another commissioner wants to make the motion, because I hate making motions, that's fine.
I motion.
Okay. Okay, we'll take the motion from Vice Chair Diaz. Second?
So seconded.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Brown, because I saw her. Very good. Do we need further discussion? Commissioner Garcia?
So what's happening with amending the bylaws?
Right. We'll take my inclination is to say we will take a look at it. I don't know that we have to amend the bylaws themselves, or let's say it that way. We don't have to amend the bylaws themselves because they anticipate the word rotation. If the commission wants to capture our decision in the bylaws, I could see that as perfectly appropriate. And as Commissioner Krugliak mentioned, we just need 9 votes for it. So my suggestion would be, let us talk about it with staff, meaning me and Commissioner Katarina at the moment, and come back with whether a recommendation on whether to amend the bylaws or not. And we can certainly discuss that at the next meeting, but I'm not sure we have to. I think it's more of whether we want to. Hillary, is that correct?
Yeah, the mandatory bylaw amendment would be if the commission was wanting to have 2 co-chairs, 2 co-vice chairs, I'm sorry, which is not currently contemplated by the bylaws. The bylaws do currently contemplate rotations. So if that is the route that the commission is going, no amendment is going to be needed to the bylaws.
But it could still be a binding decision by the commission at the next meeting by vote.
The in terms of amending the
The
bylaws
rotation
or
schedule.
oh,
Oh,
the
and the rotation
rotating
schedule.
schedule. Yes, the commission will need to take action at the next meeting to determine the rotating schedule.
Commissioner Garcia, does that?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm just a little bit confused because I thought that what was being considered was an amendment to the bylaws to allow for 2 vice
I
chair.
agree. That was my understanding as well.
So I'm just
And
confused.
that was my proposal.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that was my proposal.
okay, to have 2, to create a second co-vice chair, because that really would take
Yeah.
a bylaws
It
amendment.
would take a vote next time, but it would allow for continuity without this determination of 4 months, 1 week, 1 week, 1 month, 1 month, just.
Okay, in that case,
you guys
my
working as a
suggestion,
team.
right, so why don't we change the wording in the amendment a little bit with something like, just drop the word schedule, with rotation to be determined at our next meeting. Hillary, would that be okay?
It depends upon what the commission is trying to accomplish here. So if the commission is wanting to approve the motion to have a rotating vice chair, so 1 vice chair in place at a time, then it could amend the motion to clarify the rotation. If what I think Commissioner Garcia and Krugliak and maybe others are suggesting something different, which is to have 2 vice chairs in place simultaneously, which would require an amendment to the bylaws. And if that is what the commission is wanting to pursue, I think that might be an entirely different motion, in which case the commission may wish to just appoint an interim vice chair to get them through to the next meeting, and then make a determination about amending the bylaws and potentially appointing permanent co-chairs after that amendment has taken place.
Or co-vice chairs. All right, then good.
Sorry, yes.
My suggestion then would be, let's keep it simple for tonight because we've done a lot tonight. Let's just, and Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Caterina, I want to make sure you're perfectly comfortable with it. We would have a motion to approve Commissioner Boehm as chair and Commissioner Caterina as interim vice chair through the March 11th or until the March 11th meeting. That would mean we would start with a motion, or very early in our agenda, we would start with a motion to amend the bylaws and install co-vice chairs with, for the record, the explicit understanding that would be Commissioners Caterina and Garcia in that rotation. Commissioner Garcia.
I just want to make sure that that is acceptable and that the entire commission agrees to that. I was just wanting to make sure that I understood. I was a little bit confused because I thought that's sort of where we had landed, and then the motion and where we were headed was not consistent with that. So if what the commission wants is the rotating vice chair, and that we're going to work that out later, that I want to make sure that I'm not pushing the commission in a direction that they didn't want to go.
I'll take full responsibility for confusing things, as I've always managed to do. So, but it's a very good point. And I did, before we'll go to the motion, let's just make sure, are there any objections, concerns, additional comments? Very good. So do I have a motion? I'll read it one more time, just for the record, to approve Commissioner Boehm as chair and Commissioner Caterina as interim chair to March 11th, at which time we'll take this up.
Chair Boehm, we already have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Diaz, seconded by Commissioner Brown. So if they're amenable to those motions or would like to withdraw their motion, then that would be appropriate this time.
I'll withdraw the motion.
And do you want to, Commissioner Brown, we okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
Good. Vice Chair Diaz, do you want to just take up that motion?
Yeah, but I also would also present the idea of, if we need an interim, I can serve as interim until March 11th, which would require just like change, just to make it easier and simplify it. Because I'm getting confused about what we're, trying to do here, and just for the,
thank you for
the interest of time.
Okay. Okay, we'll get this wrapped up very quickly. Commissioner Caterina, do you want to be interim, or do you want Vice Chair Diaz to remain interim?
I get to decide all by my lonesome, huh?
I'm honestly happy either way, but we need a motion to go that way, and I don't want to.
I appreciate Commissioner Diaz stepping up, because I know she has a full-time job and she's busy. I would go back to Hillary and Andrew or Barbara. Is this okay if we continue with the interim vice chair and nominate David Boehm to be the permanent chair?
It would just be, I think, require just a slight tweak to that existing motion, which would be to change it to an extension of Vice Chair Diaz's interim period until the March 11 meeting. Andrew, does that track with what you've got on the motion?
Yes, I think that'd be appropriate. If Vice Chair Diaz was continuing on, then the motion would be to approve Commissioner Boehm as permanent chair, and then extend Commissioner Diaz as vice chair until March 11th.
I'll make that motion.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Dostal. Second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Brown again. Good. Any discussion? Good. Andrew, can you please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Dostal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Servin,
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Chair Bame,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And thank you, commissioners. And again, without extending things, thank you. I deeply appreciate everything that was said. And Vice Chair Diaz, I'm happy to have one more. This is good. All right, now, it is 7:55. Our next item is a redistricting budget status update. Barbara and staff have prepared a good staff report that I hope everyone has read. My advice would be that we go ahead and hear from Barbara, hear any important questions, and that if we need to, take them up again in the next meeting. I do notice we have Nicole with us too, which is a great time to have a resource, and thank you for your patience. But unless there's objection, I'll turn to Barbara to provide highlights to the report along with other staff.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Bame. I'll keep this brief. The staff report on this item addresses the line item budget in detail. In summary, about $1,200 has been expended with additional projected expenditures of almost $69,000 from monthly charges and invoice amounts. The largest amount of our projected expenditures, about $60,000, is for contracted services of outside redistricting counsel from last November through January of this year. And so I'd like to give the commission a look into some anticipated changes with this contract. So as the staff report indicates, and as previously discussed with the commission, the responsibilities of redistricting counsel have increased significantly from initial estimates, adding general counsel and procurement advisory services that were previously anticipated. And you'll see in the staff report there, we've tried to lay it side by side in county and outside counsel. I'm hoping that helps to explain it as well. Having an IRC is new for the county, or this type of IRC, and as much we've been adapting as the process evolves. For instance, we didn't know how many hours were going to be necessary to provide general counsel services to the commission. But we did recognize that the fee, and that it would be important to revisit the fee and address any changes such as unforeseen work. So our county counsel is discussing this with outside counsel now. So the county counsel holds the contract for these outside counsel services. Although discussions are ongoing, we do anticipate total cost for redistricting counsel to grow to a preliminary estimate of between $400,000 to $600,000 total through December of 2021 from the current budget, and final amounts will be capped in any contract amendment. We do plan to have an update on the revised payment structure for the commission next month. Staff will also address impacts to the commission line item budget. And that would be, or this would be an opportunity for the commission to consider any other budget adjustments or additions that may be desired. For example, we heard from the ad hocs. I know there's some questions, thoughts, ideas around additional trainings, additional public outreach. So those all could be additional software services and discussion items. So at this rate, it looks like we need to request additional appropriations from the Board of Supervisors. Staff have begun to preliminary have internal conversations about that process and what that would look like in terms of going back to the Board of Supervisors tentatively in April or May. And we would have more information for the commission next month. And I don't know if you would like Nicole to go over some of the additional budget details, or based on the documents that were attached, if would defer or not have that presentation.
Perhaps given the hour, it would be best, Nicole, if there are any key highlights you want to make sure we know now, And I promise you, we'll find some time in our next meeting if anything urgent arises, but otherwise we'll tee things up for the follow-on meeting. I know Commissioner Serban has a hand up and will certainly entertain some short questions, but Nicole, any short highlights or key highlights you want to make?
I think Barbara covered the most salient issues.
Very good. Commissioner Serban?
The earlier presentation by our guests mentioned grants, giving grants to maybe community organizations and that kind of thing. I'm not sure how that would work, if it's something that's outside of the RFP process or what. I'm wondering though if that's something that we can incorporate into our budget or consider as a line item in our budget.
So I'll attempt to respond and I'll have the team respond. If we want to bring that back for when we look at the additional appropriations that might be necessary, and that's the commission desire, we can build that into maybe one request to the Board of Supervisors and add that in as well. So that would be my recommendation. The other idea I just add is that also could be something you build into that RFP for that community outreach. That could be something that RFP or that contractor actually builds in within that RFP process. So it's not a separate process. So those are two thoughts.
Yeah. And one other question, Barbara, is it impossible for the county to do this task themselves, like to take this in-house for county council? I understand the implications for independence, but can't we firewall like one council on and have that person doing this? I mean, we're spending almost $1 million in legal.
Yeah, so initially the intent, of course, was that county council would be covering it with outside counsel doing the specialized. And legal counsel does play an essential role in all of our commission's work. The county felt, and this was after we had started, but before I think the full commission was had been seated, that it was important that the IRC have legal counsel sitting with them at the commission's first meeting. So it was, they moved on that, but based on additional research by council and the fact that county council provides legal advice to the Board of Supervisors and the county departments. And because of that independent commission, they felt it was important that the IRC have that independent legal counsel.
Understood.
Okay. Thank you for that though. I have Commissioner Krugliak, Commissioner Katerina, Vice Chair Diaz. Commissioner Krugliak, please.
I think my request is just whether this could be brought up potentially fuller in the next meeting, because I see that the scope has increased just what's available here by, going from 1 line to 3 lines, but the cost has gone up more than a factor of 3. I understand why we have selected our outside legal counsel, because they're incredibly well established and top notch on everything related to redistricting. My question is whether have we considered other options for legal services, local for the other council options, just to understand what the different pricing structure is for San Diego based versus Bay Area based, and all. I think there's a lot of probably pretty obvious questions from the summary that probably are worth going into a little bit more depth. I don't think we're ready to do that here, but it's probably worth, given just the massive change from what we were expecting, probably worth discussing in a bit more detail in the future.
Very good point. Commissioner Katerina.
I just had a couple things, and I agree with Commissioner Krugliak. I think we need to probably dive down into this a little bit, and I even wonder if perhaps isn't the time to maybe stand up a budgeting ad hoc committee. But my question today at this moment is, in the last budget that we received, we had $0 for translation and interpretation, and now we have $81,800. Is that money? Monies that are used to translate our agendas? Is that the plan for that $80,000+? Or does that include other translations that we'll need to do on behalf of some of our, maybe at some of our public meetings?
Commissioner, that amount was sufficient to cover our estimates of translation for the commission's agendas and also live translation that may be requested for your meeting in the 8 required languages under the Elections Code.
So Vice Chair Diaz, then Commissioner Pons.
I think my question was already addressed. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Pons.
Yes, and if you recall at the last meeting, I made a recommendation that we establish a budget subcommittee, but it was stated that it was too early in the phase of the process. I think in hindsight, it wasn't too early. So I think we can make maybe a recommendation that we propose standing up a budget subcommittee at the next meeting as an agenda item.
Very good. Thank you for that. I should have identified, in fact, that this is an action item to approve this redistricting line item budget for February 2021. We could, my recommendation is we'll keep that simple and just have a motion on that, but we can certainly include in the agenda next time, because it sounds like commissioners are interested in it, a more fulsome discussion of this with consideration of establishing at least an ad hoc committee. Commissioner Inman, before we go to any motion.
Well, it just struck me that we're going to have to, you said we're going to vote to approve this budget. So what happens if we don't approve it? I guess I don't understand.
And
is this an action item?
The next question I was going to ask now, Barbara, Nicole, Hillary, do we need to, what does approval actually constitute, and do we need to do it tonight?
This is a concurrent approval of the budget, what's been expended, what's anticipated to be expended. A couple of notes, you'll see like the laptops, we have some expenditures there. We've received and processed the invoices for council for back from November. There was just an issue with Oracle, which is why you're not seeing it there. But it's a concurrent approval. There's not taking any action in terms of augmenting the contracts for council or anything like that. I've mentioned it a couple months. Providing more detail. County council is working with the contractor, but the commission may come back next month and take a different action as it relates to council or any other budget items. Nicole, did I miss anything?
Okay, so for tonight.
No, just to note. I'm sorry, just to note that the commission's approval is a concurrence, and it wouldn't affect any appropriation amounts that have already been allocated for redistricting by the board.
Right. So building off Commissioner Ponce's comments, I'm sorry, Commissioner Larson, please go ahead.
The agenda calls for an update. It doesn't call for any action at all.
That's correct. That's what I was weighing in to say the same thing. It's agendized as just for staff to provide an update, and there is no action item for the commission tonight on this
Okay,
item.
that solves the confusion that I had as I realized what I was reading. So thank you both for that. All right, we will leave that as is then for now, with the understanding that we will take up at least the idea of some sort of ad hoc committee or subcommittee at our next meeting, and staff will be asked to look into that and perhaps come up with a proposal. Vice Chair Diaz.
I'd like to make a motion to, do we need to make a motion for that consideration for the next agenda or for the next meeting?
No,
Then
we'll just get it on. We'll get it on the agenda for the next meeting. I just
Oh.
don't want the commissioners surprised when it's on there. I assume there's no objection or additional comment on that. Very good. Thank you for your patience with that. Okay, we move on to the final item, adjournment. That concludes our business for today. The next meeting of the commission is Thursday, March 11th at 2 p.m., where I will take an hour and 45 minutes to describe all the problems with that UN committee that they mentioned in the in the report. I lost about 2 years of my life to that committee. It's not going to happen again. Anyway, thank you all very much again for a really, really interesting and productive meeting, and again for the kind words. The meeting is adjourned at 8:09 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.